Good afternoon. My name is Christina Reith. I'm the state archaeologist here at the New York State Museum. And today what we're going to talk about is the Smith-Holloway site. The Smith-Holloway site is located in the town of Schoharie, here in central New York. It's part of an early transitional early archaic occupation that we excavated back in 2002 and 2003. As a result of this excavation, we found a lot of artifacts and we found a lot of materials relating to this early time period. And what I'm going to show you today is what we found and how this relates to other occupations here in the Northeast. Here I have a map of what we excavated, and here you can see the areas that we excavated here and how they were laid out on a grid. The background itself was something that we excavated previously, and other archaeologists actually excavated the site and brought the artifacts here to the State Museum. When we excavated the site, we actually went out and did an archaeological field school, which is a training opportunity for students in which we brought students out and we used them to excavate the site at the Smith-Holloway site. Here you can see the excavation here. This is how we're excavating, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Before we go on a little bit, there are a couple of things that I need to discuss. For starters, what are artifacts? Artifacts are manufactured materials at the site, and these are materials that include projectile points, pottery, and other materials at the site. In addition to that, we also have features. Features are materials that we can't bring back to the site, but we excavate in the field and we actually use them to look at pottery and look at other materials that are found in the ground surface. Here we have an example of this. This is a feature here, and what we're doing is we are excavating this site at the Smith-Holloway site. In addition, we also have what are called ecofacts. Ecofacts are materials that we have from the site, and these materials are often soil samples, and there are other materials that allow us to look at what is occurring at the site itself. Here we've got soil samples, things like materials that shells and other materials that are also part of this site itself. So what did we find at the site? Well, at the site we actually looked at two different occupations. The first of these is the transitional period, which I'll talk about at this point in time. Here we have different artifacts recovered from the site. This is probably the best artifact. It's called an Orient fishtail point, and it dates to roughly around 1000 to 1500 AD. It looks like a fishtail, and that's how we classify it as being a fishtail point. In addition, we've got other artifacts which were started to be fishtail points or other artifacts which were actually used at the site. This is a biface here. The top of it is broken off, and so what we have here is a material that was discarded here at the site. Here we have a bottom part of this fishtail point here, and the bottom part of it snapped off here, and so all we've got is the top part of the site, the artifact at the site here. Here we have a scraper. It's got a very rough edge here, and the artifact itself is used for scraping hides and other materials at the site. And what will happen is that there are also tubers and stuff which we can also use to scrape materials off of. Here is artifacts recovered from the site. These are materials, these are debitage. Debitage is material that is waste flakes recovered from the site, and this is probably the most numerous that we have at this artifact that we have at the site. The site itself contains nearly 90% lithic material, and much of what we have here is material that is just waste flakes recovered from the site. Here we have fire-cracked rock. Fire-cracked rock is material that you'd put into a fire, and ultimately what has happened is it's broken off, and in some cases here it's kind of got a pink tinge to it. That's what tells us that it's fire-cracked rock or other materials relating to the site itself. And finally here we've got some charcoal. The charcoal is recovered from comes from the site. It's part of the late woodland time period and early transitional time period, and ultimately what it does is it tells us how long the site was occupied for. We use things like accelerator mass spectrometry and other materials to actually look at how the charcoal was used. And so that is really what we found at the transitional period. At the early woodland period, we've got different artifacts recovered from the site here, and this time period dates more to around the late 1000 to around 200 AD. Here at the site, much of what we've found here is larger in number, and much of what we used at the site or excavated at the site has really been different from what we have here. This is a mid-wind projectile point. The top itself has been taken off of it, but there's not much of it left on it here. And here's another one here. It's got the notches on the side, but the top itself has broken off, possibly through part of what the manufacturing process. In addition to that, we've also got some cache blades. The cache blades itself are often put into some sort of cache, and we have a whole bunch of these at the site itself. And here's another one here. Here we have the bottom part of a pentalis blade. It's the bottom part of a blade itself that was used at the site. And once again, it's broken off. Many of these artifacts have been broken off, so we don't know what the whole, how large it was or what the occupation of it was here. At the early woodland period, what we have is the first evidence of pottery. This is pottery itself. It's very fragmented, but we know that from what we have at the site that it was probably part of a pot or some other artifact recovered from the site. Here we have utilized flakes. These are flakes that were, the outer surface was utilized, and what we have here is materials that are really nicely formatted here at the site. Here we have a hammerstone. The hammerstone itself, it has a pit in it. And the same thing here. This is a pitted stone. Here it's got multiple divots in it. It was probably used for nutting stones and using other materials for cutting stone into it. And here we have what we believe to be part of a hammer and pestle. The pestle itself is truncated here, and so we don't have the other part of it here. But what's interesting is if you look at it, it's got a divot here, and we can look at how it was used in the past. And then we actually have materials relating to what we actually recovered from the site. These are nutshells, which are present at the site. And this is wood charcoal. So that is what we found at the early woodland period. So how does that relate to other sites in the Schoharie Valley? Well, in the Schoharie Valley, we've been excavating at what's called the Pethic site. The Pethic site is very similar in relationship to this site, except it has more artifacts relating to it. This includes a steatite bowl, which is a carved stone bowl, which was used itself. So we know that what happened was very different from what we've got here in terms of how they were using vessels at the site. We've got things here with materials relating to how we excavated the site, other artifacts, which include stones and other materials relating to the site. And then we've got an Orient fishtail point, which tells us how often it was used. In addition, we also looked at the Schoharie Creek 2 site. The Schoharie Creek 2 site also has very similar artifacts. It has a scraper here. We've got other materials relating to how the artifacts were formed at the site. And so what we're looking at now is how these sites are excavated and how the sites here in the Schoharie Valley were utilized in the past. So that's what we know about the Schoharie Valley. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or if not, I'd be happy to look at artifacts, talk with you in the future. Thank you very much.